Imagine archaeologists aren't just digging up dirt, but uncovering a new clue every week, suggesting we might not be alone in the universe. Today, let's look at 4 of the most famous discoveries that fans of ancient aliens often point to as evidence of contact with extraterrestrials. First is the sarcophagus of King Pakal in Palenque. On the lid, he appears to be sitting like a pilot, panels and controls in front of him, and beneath him something that resembles flames or a jet stream. In popular illustrations, people even add a spacesuit to the scene, turning Pakal into an astronaut launching into space. For UFO enthusiasts, it's the perfect rocket launch tableau, but officially, archaeologists interpret it as classic Maya mythology. Pakal descending into the underworld and rising along the world tree, while the engine is just stylized fire and religious symbols. Next, the Temple of Sacsayhuamán in Abydos. On one of the ceiling beams, you can spot shapes eerily similar to a helicopter, a tank, and even a flying saucer. For ancient astronaut believers, it's practically a blueprint of an alien hangar, as if the Egyptians simply carved what they saw in the sky. Egyptologists, however, offer a simpler explanation. It's a palimpsest, a blend of 2 different inscriptions carved at different times. When the plaster fell off, the overlapping hieroglyphs created accidental shapes, and our brains filled in the rest with familiar military machines. The third artifact is the mysterious dendera lamps. In the reliefs, priests hold large elongated bulbs with what looks like a cable running to some kind of device. Online, they're often called ancient electric lamps or even plasma tubes, a gift from alien visitors who brought humans the technology of light. Historians of religion strongly disagree. These aren't lamps at all, but symbolic images, a sacred serpent representing a deity emerging from a lotus. And the supposed cable is just a stylized support pillar. And finally, the dog figurines from ancient Japan. Huge eyes, thick goggles, layered suits. They look almost like engineers from another planet wearing full astronaut gear. These statues fit perfectly into the narrative of visitors who once arrived, interacted with humans, and left small replicas of themselves behind. Archaeologists, though, see dog as ritual objects connected to fertility and illness, and the spacesuits as nothing more than the artistic style of the Yeoman period. But the more you look at these discoveries, the more you feel it. Either our ancestors had incredible imaginations, or someone really was inspiring them from the sky. High above the ancient city of Cusco in Peru sits a fortress that honestly just defies logic. Sacsayhuamán. To this day, it remains one of the most extraordinary examples of stone construction on the planet. And it's not because of how grand it is, but because of how perfect. Massive stones, some weighing over 100 tons, were carved and fitted together so precisely that not even a sheet of paper can slide between them. There's no mortar, no filler, no glue, just stone against stone, locked like a 3-dimensional puzzle forged by giants. And you know, these aren't ordinary blocks. Each one has a unique shape, often with 12 or more angles. This wasn't some kind of assembly line work. Every stone had to be shaped individually to match the ones around it, and then moved often uphill into place. Modern engineers admit they'd struggle to replicate it today, even with cranes and laser cutting. And yet, whoever built Sacsayhuamán did it with bronze or stone tools, centuries before the Spanish ever arrived in South America. Mainstream history attributes the fortress to the Inca Empire, but even some Incan oral traditions suggest it was built by an earlier people. The Incas, as skilled as they were, might have inherited and expanded it rather than constructed it from scratch. Parts of the lower walls look older, rougher, and more weathered, as if they'd been standing for far longer than official timelines allow. Then there's the layout. From above, Sacsayhuamán takes on a zigzag pattern, like the teeth of a giant saw. Some believe it mimics the shape of lightning, which held spiritual significance. Others suggest it was a military strategy, forcing invaders to zigzag uphill under fire. But there's more. Nearby carved stones resemble thrones, drainage systems, and even what some researchers say could be ancient energy lines or water channels. And the mysteries don't stop at the surface. Beneath the fortress are a series of tunnels and chambers, some partially collapsed, others completely unexplored. One tunnel is rumored to stretch all the way to Cusco Cathedral, though no one has made it through. Whether that's folklore or fact is still up for debate, but the air of secrecy surrounding Sacsayhuamán is hard to miss. Even in ruins, it feels deliberate engineered to last forever. No wonder so many visitors leave convinced they've walked through something beyond ordinary history. It doesn't just challenge our understanding of the past, it dares us to question what humans were truly capable of or whether someone else got a head start. Buried beneath the quiet town of Rockwall, Texas, lies a discovery so strange that it actually gave the town its name literally. Back in the 1850s, settlers digging a well struck something unexpected, a massive underground wall made of cut stone. At first, they thought it was just a natural formation, but the deeper they dug, the weirder it got. The wall stretches for miles with giant sandstone blocks stacked on top of one another, forming long, straight lines, right angles, and even what appears to be archways. Some of the blocks are fitted together so tightly that they honestly resemble brickwork. For decades, locals debated whether it was just an odd quirk of geology or a relic left behind by an unknown civilization. Geologists who studied the structure claimed it was a natural sandstone formation, created by jointing and erosion. But not everyone was convinced. In the 1970s and again in the 1990s, researchers and independent investigators returned to the site and some claimed to find inscriptions, metal rings embedded in the stone, and signs of tool marks. Unfortunately, full access to the formation is difficult. Much of it remains underground, buried beneath homes and businesses, or simply sealed off. What keeps the story alive is how the rock wall doesn't behave like any ordinary natural feature. The stones are consistent in size, laid out in regular patterns, and in some cases appear to have been mended as if someone tried to repair or reinforce it long ago. One theory suggests it was once a colossal retaining wall for a city that predates recorded history in North America. Others point to electromagnetic anomalies in the area and claim there's more going on below the surface than we understand. There are no confirmed artifacts, no skeletons, no pottery shards, nothing that firmly connects the wall to a known culture. And yet its presence challenges the narrative that ancient North America was sparsely populated by simple societies. If the wall is artificial, it would be one of the oldest and largest man-made structures in the hemisphere. Deep in Cambodia's jungle, Prohm sleeps beneath a canopy of leaves, tangled in roots and time. Once part of the mighty Angkor temple complex, it was built in the 12th century by the Khmer Empire as a sprawling Buddhist monastery. But today, nature has reclaimed it. Completely massive trees grow from rooftops, their roots gripping the walls like ancient hands. Unlike other temples in the region, Prohm wasn't fully restored. Its collapsed corridors, moss-covered carvings, and half-buried passageways were left just as they were found, haunting, raw, and undeniably powerful. Walking through its ruins feels like stepping into a forgotten world. Stone towers lean under the weight of centuries, and doorways seem to open into another dimension. There's something mysterious about the way it blends with the jungle, like it grew there rather than being built. Some parts of the temple, based on surviving carvings and layouts, suggest it might have once looked completely different, sharper, cleaner, monumental before the jungle swallowed them. Strangely, some of the stone reliefs depict animals that don't quite match anything native to the region, adding to the questions surrounding the site. Prohm doesn't just tell a story of a lost civilization. It shows what happens when time, nature, and human ambition merge and then quietly vanish beneath the vines. In eastern China, near the village of Xi'an, sits one of the most puzzling construction feats of the ancient world, the Longyou caves. At first, locals thought they were just flooded ponds. But in 1992, when a few villagers pumped one dry, they uncovered something mind-blowing: an enormous man-made cavern, carved entirely by hand into solid siltstone. Then they drained another, and another. In total, 24 of these massive underground chambers were found, each the size of a cathedral. What makes them so mysterious isn't just the scale, though. They're enormous, but the precision. Every wall is smooth and straight, carved with parallel chisel marks that run perfectly even across thousands of square feet. The ceilings are flat and uncracked, the pillars evenly spaced. Some rooms are nearly 100 feet tall, with interiors so vast that they echo like natural caves. But these aren't natural. Every inch was carved by human hands. And here's the real kicker: no one knows who built them. No ancient texts mention the caves, no tools have ever been found, no debris, no miscuts, no abandoned stones. It's as if the builders vanished without leaving a trace. The estimated volume of material removed from all 24 caves would have been nearly 1 million cubic meters, a staggering amount, especially for an era with no advanced machinery. Yet, there's no nearby dump site, no piles of leftover stone. Where did it all go? Some of the caves have curious carving symbols, birds and fish etched into walls, but even these offer no clues. The oldest records from the region make no mention of any underground complex, even though these caves would have taken decades, maybe centuries to complete. The labor, planning, and engineering are beyond what's expected of any known civilization in the area at the time. Theories range from military shelters to underground temples, storage depots to secret gathering places. Some fringe ideas even suggest contact with advanced knowledge either lost or passed down through unknown means. And while that remains unproven, the fact stands no one alive today could explain exactly how or why these caves were built. Despite being open to the public, the Longyou caves remain largely unstudied. There's no definitive archaeological campaign underway, no mainstream rush to uncover more. And maybe that's what makes them even more haunting. They exist in plain sight. Yet no one knows their story. In the desolate mountains of western China, near the edge of the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau, looms a formation that has fueled rumors for decades, the so-called Mount Baigong Pyramid. Jagged and rugged, the mountain doesn't look like a typical pyramid at first glance. But at its base and in the surrounding area lie hundreds of rusty, tube-like structures embedded into the rock, and no one truly knows what they are. These pipes, as they've been called, vary in size, with some as thick as a human leg. They appear to run vertically and horizontally, some plunging deep into the mountain, others crossing the surrounding lake beds. Some are fused into rock, as if they were laid down before the stone solidified a geological impossibility, according to some skeptics. Chinese scientists have conducted limited studies and found that many of the pipes are composed of iron oxide, silicon dioxide, and calcium materials that could form naturally, but also resemble old metallurgy. Strangely, some of the samples contained organic matter, such as plant remnants, even though they were pulled from deep underground. Even more puzzling, the iron content in some samples showed signs of advanced aging, hinting at immense antiquity. Of course, mainstream explanations suggest these are fossilized tree roots or natural mineral formations that just happen to look artificial. But not everyone is convinced. The fact that the area is remote and highly restricted, with official access nearly impossible without government approval, only adds to the speculation. Some fringe theorists go further, suggesting that the Baigong formation could be the remnants of a long-lost civilization or something even more exotic. While there's no direct evidence to support those claims, the sheer oddity of the pipes, coupled with their unknown origin and limited scientific follow-up, keeps the story alive. Not far from the site is Lake Tosan, where similar pipe-like formations can be found beneath the surface. Some divers who've explored it reported symmetrical arrangements of stone beneath the mud, as if remnants of an underwater structure lie buried in silence. Whether Mount Baigong is a natural freak of geology or a genuine archaeological anomaly, one thing is certain: its remote setting, unexplained features, and restricted access have helped it become one of the most mysterious and quietly debated places in modern China. A place where science stops and speculation begins. Beneath the streets of Paula, Malta, hidden from view and unknown for centuries, lies a subterranean marvel unlike anything else on Earth, the Hypogeum of Ħal Saflieni. Discovered accidentally in 1902 during construction work, this massive underground complex dates back over 5,000 years and still leaves researchers speechless with its complexity, craftsmanship, and eerie atmosphere. Carved directly into solid limestone, the Hypogeum is a multi-level labyrinth of chambers, corridors, and altars that descend over 30 feet below the surface. It wasn't just a tomb. It was a sanctuary, a ritual space, a world unto itself. The builders left no records, no inscriptions, no blueprints, only perfectly shaped rooms, acoustically tuned chambers, and strange architectural flourishes that seem to serve more than just practical purposes. One of the most baffling features is the Oracle Room, a small chamber with curved walls that produces powerful sound resonance. A low voice uttered inside can echo throughout the entire structure. Researchers say the frequency range enhances brain activity in listeners, possibly inducing trance states or altered perception. Was this intentional? And if so, how did Neolithic people understand sound in such a refined way? Even more curious is the fact that no tools were ever found on site. No chisels, no hammers, no debris piles, just smooth, carved walls and spiral motifs etched in red ochre. And though thousands of human bones were found, The absence of children's remains raised questions until they were discovered in a separate, hard-to-access chamber years later. Adding to the mystery is the disappearance of a number of skeletal remains during the early excavations. Some researchers in the mid-20th century claimed that elongated skulls were among the finds, but official records barely mention them. Whether those reports were exaggerations or not, they've added fuel to speculation about a lost culture with unusual physical traits, or possibly visitors from afar. The Hypogeum was sealed off for decades to prevent damage from humidity and tourism, and even now access is highly restricted. Only a handful of people are allowed in each day, and photography is banned. Its quiet, shadowed halls still hold more questions than answers. Despite its age, the Hypogeum feels alien, not just old, but otherworldly. A monument to something ancient, deliberate, and deeply symbolic that we've yet to fully understand. Right next to the paws of Egypt's Great Sphinx, hidden in plain sight, stands one of the most overlooked yet astonishing structures in Giza, the Sphinx Temple. Unlike the more famous pyramids and decorated tombs nearby, this temple is built in a style that feels raw, brutal, and ancient, as if it belongs to a different era entirely. The walls of the Sphinx Temple are made of massive limestone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, stacked with tight precision. These stones weren't hauled from distant quarries, they were carved directly from the bedrock during the excavation of the Sphinx itself. In other words, the temple and the statue are deeply connected, built together as part of a singular, gigantic engineering project. But here's where things get strange. While nearby structures are filled with hieroglyphs, colorful frescoes, and elaborate carvings, the Sphinx Temple is completely bare. No inscriptions, no artwork, no signs of ritual or burial, just silence and stone. Geologists have pointed to deep erosion marks on the Sphinx enclosure walls, not caused by wind, but by water. Lots of water. This has led some researchers to suggest that the temple and the Sphinx date back to a time when Egypt experienced heavy rainfall, potentially thousands of years earlier than traditional timelines allow. Mainstream Egyptologists remain cautious, dating the temple to around 2500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. But if the weathering is accurate, the structure could predate him by thousands of years, placing it before the rise of dynastic Egypt itself. There's also something off about the construction style. It resembles pre-Incan sites in South America more than the refined symmetry of later Egyptian temples. Huge blocks laid with simple but effective interlocking joints radiate a sense of permanence, like it was built to last forever, not to dazzle. While much attention has gone to the pyramids and the Sphinx's enigmatic face, the Sphinx Temple may be the key to an even older story, one buried in stone and sand, and nearly forgotten. It may not be flashy, but it holds secrets the kind that make you question whether we really know who the first builders of Egypt were. Off the eastern coast of Pompeii Island in Micronesia lies one of the most baffling and breathtaking ancient cities on Earth, Nan Madol. Stretching across nearly 100 artificial islets, this labyrinth of stone ruins floats like a forgotten memory above the Pacific, laced together by a network of narrow canals. Some call it the Venice of the Pacific, but Nan Madol is older, stranger, and built with techniques that still leave modern engineers scratching their heads. What makes Nan Madol truly astonishing isn't just its scale, it's the fact that it was built on top of a coral reef, without modern tools, cranes, or cement. Massive basalt logs, some weighing more than 50 tons, were stacked with geometric precision. There are no local quarries nearby. The stone had to be transported from across the island, somehow floated across the water, then lifted and placed into formation. Some blocks are as tall as a two-story house and look almost laser-cut. No one knows how they moved them. Local legend says the builders had help from powerful forces or flying dragons. Scientists are less poetic, but even they admit they don't have a solid answer. The city itself is laid out with eerie order. There are platforms that appear to have supported temples or royal residences. Some enclosures have high stone walls, inner courtyards, and central altars, though the jungle has crept in, reclaiming the gaps between stone. Standing in the middle of it today, the silence is almost overwhelming, broken only by the gentle splash of water and rustling palm leaves. It feels like a movie set something between Lost and Indiana Jones, except it's real. And no one's sure who wrote the script. What we do know is that Nan Madol was the ceremonial and political seat of the Sodler dynasty. But here's the catch: the Sodler were said to have arrived long after the city was already standing. Archaeological dating suggests the earliest construction began as far back as the 8th or 9th century, though some researchers argue the foundations are older still. Even the dynasty's oral traditions hint that they didn't build it, they inherited it. Some researchers have compared Nan Madol's engineering to that of Machu Picchu or the pyramids. Others go even further, calling it evidence of a now-lost seafaring civilization that may have once connected distant cultures across the ocean. There's no concrete proof for that, but Nan Madol continues to challenge every assumption we have about ancient capabilities. It's as if someone skipped ahead a few pages in the architectural playbook. And perhaps the strangest part? Despite its scale, Nan Madol has never been fully excavated. The dense mangroves and the soft coral foundations make it a nightmare for traditional archaeological work. Which means for now, most of its secrets remain underwater, tangled in roots and silence. Scientists now believe that Gunung Padang could be the oldest known step pyramid in the world, one that shatters everything we thought we knew about human history. What sets Gunung Padang apart isn't just its age, it's the depth. Using ground-penetrating radar, researchers have found that the visible megalithic structure on the surface is only the tip of a much larger, multi-layered construction buried deep underground. Some of the lowest layers could date back to 20,000 years ago, long before the rise of agriculture, and long before the Great Pyramid of Giza was even a sketch in the sand. The structure itself is made up of enormous volcanic stone blocks, arranged in terraces and platforms that form a geometric pattern not seen elsewhere in the region. The stones weren't just tossed there randomly, they were precisely placed, forming straight lines, right angles, and corridors that suggest architectural planning. It's not just a pile of rocks, it's a blueprint carved into the earth itself. What makes Gunung Padang so controversial is how it messes with the traditional timeline. If those lower layers really are as old as they seem, it means that someone, a highly organized group of people, was building complex, monumental architecture at a time when most humans were still thought to be hunter-gatherers. That idea challenges mainstream archaeology, and not everyone is comfortable with it. Critics argue that the deeper layers may be natural formations or simply modified by later cultures. But the Indonesian research team, led by geologist Dr. Danny Hillman, insists that the site shows signs of human modification throughout, including rooms, chambers, and even what may be a man-made ventilation system, all buried under volcanic soil. Adding to the mystery is the local folklore. Gunung Padang has long been considered sacred, known as the Mountain of Enlightenment. Ancient stories speak of kings, supernatural beings, and hidden chambers beneath the surface. Until recently, most of those tales were treated like harmless myths. Now they don't sound so far-fetched. Unlike the sleek columns and refined carvings of nearby temples, the Osireion is built with hulking granite blocks, some weighing over 60 tons. These aren't the kind of stones you casually move with a few hundred workers and ropes. The design is stark, almost minimal towering walls, massive pillars, and a central pool surrounded by a sunken chamber. It looks more like something you'd expect in Peru or even at Stonehenge than in traditional Egyptian architecture. What really throws researchers off is its depth. The Osireion sits far below the ground level of Seti's temple, suggesting it was already ancient when the pharaoh decided to build beside it. And here's the kicker: there's no solid record of who built it, when, or why. Seti seemed to treat it with reverence, not ownership, almost like he was preserving a relic from a forgotten era. Some Egyptologists have suggested that the Osireion was meant to represent the tomb of Osiris, the god of the underworld. That would make sense symbolically, considering its watery core and underground design. But there's a gap between symbolism and engineering, and the truth is, no one really knows how or why this monument was built the way it was. The erosion patterns on the granite pillars are also suspiciously deep, possibly caused by prolonged exposure to water. This has led some geologists to argue that the Osireion might date back to a much wetter period in Egypt's history, potentially thousands of years before the rise of dynastic civilization. If true, that would make it one of the oldest and most advanced structures in North Africa. The Osireion doesn't shout with golden statues or hieroglyphic stories. Instead, it whispers through silence and mass. It speaks in weight, in depth, in scale. It feels like a message left behind by a civilization we barely understand, one that might have known things we've only just begun to rediscover. And yet, despite its mystery, The Osireion remains on the fringe of Egypt's tourist trail. Most visitors walk through the decorated halls of Seti's temple, never realizing that just a few steps away lies something that could rewrite history. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius turned the vibrant Roman city of Pompeii into a frozen snapshot of disaster. For centuries, the ruins lay silent beneath layers of ash, until archaeologists began carefully uncovering what was left behind. Among the most heartbreaking discoveries was the plaster cast of two small figures lying side by side, mouths open, arms stiffened, caught in the instant a pyroclastic surge swallowed them. They weren't sculptures or props. They were real people whose final moments had been preserved with eerie clarity by the volcanic ash that buried the city in minutes. These casts weren't just scientific finds. They were a direct, emotional bridge to a disaster that happened nearly 2,000 years ago. Unlike statues made to look sad, these figures were sad. Their expressions, captured mid-scream, tell a story no textbook could. Archaeologists found them near the remains of a house, not far from food stores and cooking pots, daily life interrupted with no time to run. These people were caught completely off guard. What's especially shocking is how quickly the tragedy unfolded. Within seconds, a wave of superheated gas and ash raced through the city at nearly 400 miles per hour, reaching temperatures of over 900 degrees Fahrenheit. There was no warning siren, no time to escape. Entire families, friends, neighbors, many of them never made it out of their homes. And yet, their stories didn't disappear. The ash became a time capsule, sealing in not only bodies, but emotions. In a way, this discovery has changed how people see ancient history. Pompeii isn't just a place with ruins, it's a place that still holds the echoes of real human lives. The plaster casts, especially the ones of children, have toured museums around the world. They've been recreated in documentaries, referenced in shows like Doctor Who, and studied in classrooms from Italy to California. These moments frozen in time continue to speak, louder than any scroll or inscription. It's easy to think of the Roman Empire as all marble columns and grand arenas. But discoveries like this strip away the grandeur and show us the quiet, tragic human side. Not generals or emperors, just everyday people whose lives were suddenly cut short. And in the silence of those molds, the world continues to listen. In 2007, on the outskirts of Mantua, Italy, a city known for Romeo and Juliet's tragic tale, archaeologists uncovered a real-life love story buried beneath the earth. Two human skeletons, locked in an embrace, were found in a Neolithic grave dated to nearly 6,000 years ago. Their heads were turned toward each other, their arms and legs intertwined so tightly that it looked like they had been holding on until the very end. Unlike many burial sites from that era, this one was free of signs of violence or ritual sacrifice. There were no weapons, no signs of trauma, and no indication of battle. Just two people, one male, one female, deliberately buried together in a pose so intimate that it stunned even seasoned archaeologists. This wasn't an accidental positioning. Someone laid them that way, carefully, meaningfully. For decades, archaeologists have dug up skeletons side by side. That's nothing new. But what made the Valdaro pair different was the undeniable emotion it stirred. Viewers around the world saw photos of them and immediately felt something more than curiosity. They felt connection. Some even called it proof that love can survive death. It's not hard to see why. Their expressions are long gone, their stories forgotten, but the way they lie together still says everything. Interestingly, the burial was found near items like flint blades and tools, hinting that they weren't just laid to rest randomly. There may have been a deeper meaning, perhaps spiritual, perhaps symbolic. What makes it even more powerful is how little we know. They could have been partners, or siblings, or friends. Yet their pose leaves little room for doubt they mattered to each other deeply. Now known as the lovers of Valdaro, the two are preserved and displayed in a museum, encased in glass, side by side forever. Visitors walk by silently, often pausing longer than at any golden artifact or ancient statue. There's no famous name, no epic battle, just a single scene from prehistory that speaks volumes. In a world often fascinated by kings and conquests, these two humble skeletons remind us that connection, not power, is what lasts longest. On the island of Öland, off Sweden's southeastern coast, lies the quiet ruin of a once thriving village called Sandby Borg. But beneath its stone walls, archaeologists found a chilling scene that tells a story of sudden and total devastation. What they uncovered wasn't a battlefield or a burial ground, it was a massacre frozen in place. Inside the remains of homes, skeletons were found sprawled on the floors, still lying where they fell. There were no signs of burials, no efforts to move the bodies. Some had sword wounds to the skull. Others had their arms raised, as if trying to shield themselves. These people had been attacked without warning. There were signs of valuables left untouched. Gold, jewelry, tools, all still there, which meant it wasn't a raid for plunder. It was something personal, a message, total annihilation. What shocked archaeologists most was the silence that followed. The attackers didn't just kill, they wiped the place off the map. No one came back to bury the dead. The village was never rebuilt. For over 1,500 years, the remains lay undisturbed, slowly being absorbed into the soil until modern teams began digging in the 2010s. Some researchers believe the attack may have been part of a power struggle, one group wiping out a rival clan. But the sheer brutality combined with the deliberate abandonment suggests it was more than war. It was erasure. Today, Sandby Borg is one of the most haunting archaeological sites in Europe. The stones still stand, but now they carry the weight of a story that was never meant to be told. And thanks to archaeology, those who were silenced now speak again. Not with words, but with the positions they were found in and the silence that followed them. High in the icy peaks of the Andes, over 22,000 feet above sea level, a discovery was made that, honestly, shocked even the most experienced archaeologists. Inside a stone burial chamber on Argentina's Llullaillaco volcano, a perfectly preserved young woman sat, her head tilted gently forward, her hair neatly braided, her face peaceful, but with a single tear streak frozen on her cheek. She became known as La Doncella, or the Maiden. She wasn't found lying down. She was seated in a ritual posture wrapped in fine textiles and surrounded by offerings, feathers, corn, ceremonial objects. Her preservation was astonishing. The cold, dry air had kept her skin, eyelashes, even her clothes almost intact for over 5 centuries. She looked more like a sleeping girl than a mummy. La Doncella was part of the Incan Capacocha ceremony, an offering to the gods made during times of drought or political uncertainty. Chosen for her beauty and status, she was taken from her community and brought to the summit of one of the highest volcanoes in the world. The journey would have taken weeks. When she reached the top, she was given a mixture of sacred herbs and alcohol to make her fall asleep. Then she was left to freeze in the thin mountain air. What makes this discovery so intense isn't just the level of preservation, it's the small details. Her face, still soft, her clothes folded carefully, her braids woven with care. Archaeologists who saw her up close say it felt like stepping into a moment frozen in time, but also deeply human, like meeting someone you can't help but feel for, even across centuries. La Doncella doesn't shout history at you. She whispers it. She doesn't come from a textbook. She comes from a place of silence and snow, where belief and sacrifice crossed paths, and the world still hasn't stopped listening. Across the foggy wetlands of northern Europe, archaeologists have uncovered some of the most haunting discoveries ever found: human remains buried not under stone or dirt, but deep in peat bogs. These bog bodies are so well preserved that even fingerprints and facial stubble can still be seen, despite dating back over 2,000 years. And you know, many of them are not adults. In Denmark, Ireland, and Germany, teams have uncovered bodies with intact hair, twisted limbs, and even visible eyelashes. Some were found with ropes around their necks, others with carefully placed offerings beside them. One particularly famous case is that of a teenage figure dubbed Wide Girl, discovered in the Netherlands. Her long red hair and peaceful face seemed to defy the centuries she'd spent buried in acidic mud. Why were these people placed in the bogs? Some believe they were sacrificed, possibly during tribal ceremonies asking for fertile land or victory in war. But what stands out is how ritualized and careful these burials were. These weren't random. These were significant. The peat worked like nature's freezer. Cool, low oxygen conditions stopped bacteria in their tracks, preserving skin, organs, and clothing. It's like opening a door to the Iron Age and finding someone waiting on the other side. These discoveries don't just teach us about ancient rituals. They connect us to real individuals from a distant world. They weren't myths. They were real, with lives and communities that vanished long ago. And thanks to the bogs, they never truly left. Right in the heart of Mexico City stands the remains of one of the most sacred and blood-soaked places in Mesoamerican history, the Templo Mayor. This massive stepped pyramid once towered over the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. And what archaeologists found beneath its layers has fascinated and, honestly, horrified people around the world. Excavations in recent decades revealed hundreds of human skulls arranged in towering racks called tzompantli. These were real structures the Aztecs built to display the heads of those sacrificed to the gods. Beneath the temple itself, they found offering pits packed with bones, obsidian blades, shells, and even jaguar remains. But what really shook researchers were the tightly packed skeletons, many with cut marks on the ribs and spines, showing how precise the rituals had been. This wasn't random violence. It followed strict ceremonial rules, often tied to the Aztec calendar, cosmic alignments, and seasonal cycles. The sun god needed strength, they believed, and strength came from life essence. The victims were often treated as honored guests before the ritual, fed well, adorned with elaborate paint and feathers, and led in procession to the temple summit. In one recent discovery, archaeologists found a large stone box filled with bones and carved skulls, buried beneath what would have been a public space. It wasn't hidden, it was meant to be seen. And today those bones speak more powerfully than any glyph or scroll ever could. These aren't just relics of a lost world. They're a chilling window into a civilization that saw life and death through a completely different lens. To them, sacrifice wasn't destruction. It was an offering to something bigger. And thanks to the archaeologists peeling back each layer of the Templo Mayor, that worldview is no longer a mystery. In the quiet countryside of Somerset, England, lies a place that looks peaceful enough from the outside. But inside Gough's cave, archaeologists uncovered something deeply unsettling. Bones more than 14,000 years old were scattered across the floor. At first it seemed like any other prehistoric site, but then they noticed something strange. The bones had cut marks. Clean, deliberate cuts like those made by tools used to process meat. Even more shocking, some of the skulls had been carefully shaped into bowls. These weren't accidents. This was intentional. Experts determined that these early humans weren't just surviving in harsh conditions. They were turning to practices that most societies would later abandon entirely. It wasn't about violence or punishment. It was about survival, and maybe even ritual. These people lived at the edge of the last ice age, when the land was cold, resources were scarce, and the line between life and death was razor thin. What makes this site so significant is how methodical everything was. The way the bones were stripped, the way the skulls were shaped, there was a system to it. Some scientists think it may have had spiritual meaning, not just a desperate attempt to endure the cold. The remains found at Gough's cave are now stored and studied under strict conditions, revealing more each year. The tools, bones, and markings tell a story that's uncomfortable but undeniable. These people did what they had to do to survive a brutal world. And in doing so, they left behind one of the oldest and most complex archaeological puzzles in British history. Everyone knows about Pompeii, but fewer have heard of Herculaneum, its smaller neighbor buried by the same volcanic eruption. While Pompeii was hit by a rain of ash, Herculaneum was smothered in a boiling wave of gas and mud that rushed in so fast it turned people to stone-like shells in seconds. When archaeologists began excavating a row of seaside boathouses, they expected to find storage rooms. Instead, they uncovered something far more devastating. Packed inside these shelters were over 300 people, huddled together, waiting for rescue that never came. Many of them were found clutching bags of jewelry, food, and tools, the most valuable items they could carry. They weren't running away from home. They were waiting to be saved. Some were resting against walls. Others lay curled up in the corners. They had gathered near the shore, likely hoping that Roman ships would arrive. But the heat wave reached them before any help did. In the blink of an eye, their lives were over, sealed in volcanic mud, so quickly that archaeologists later recovered their skeletons still wearing earrings, belts, and sandals. One particularly haunting find was of a soldier, still wearing a military belt and carrying a sword. He had made it that far, possibly guiding others to safety. He died doing so. The site is so well preserved that researchers were able to study their last meals from the contents of their stomachs. Unlike Pompeii's theatrical ruins, Herculaneum is quieter but more intimate. The faces aren't cast in plaster, they're bones frozen in place. Still, waiting, watching. And thanks to the volcanic flow that swallowed them, their story didn't end in silence. It was only paused until we uncovered it again. In the mid-1800s, two British ships, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, set out to chart the Northwest Passage, a sea route through the Arctic that had never been successfully mapped. The mission, led by Sir John Franklin, vanished without a trace. For over a century, no one knew what happened. Then, piece by piece, the Arctic began giving up its secrets. Archaeologists and forensic teams eventually found skeletal remains scattered across the harsh landscape of King William Island. The bodies showed signs of extreme cold exposure and malnutrition. Some had deep cuts in the bones, suggesting the unimaginable, people doing whatever they could to survive once the ships were trapped in ice. One haunting discovery was a pair of skeletal legs still inside woolen trousers, found alone on the tundra. In another case, a makeshift boat was found, loaded with silverware, books, and human bones. These weren't seasoned Arctic explorers by that point. They were exhausted men carrying symbols of home through a frozen wasteland. As recently as the last decade, archaeologists discovered the sunken remains of both ships, eerily well preserved in the icy water. Plates, tools, even leather boots remained on board. But it's the human stories found in fragments along the shoreline that leave the strongest impression. The Franklin expedition wasn't lost to some sudden disaster. It slowly unraveled, step by step, mile by mile. The starved remains aren't just bones. They're what's left of an ambition that reached too far into the cold and paid the ultimate price. What began as a triumph of exploration ended in one of history's quietest, saddest collapses. So, when locals in Andhra Pradesh spotted this massive creature on the riverbank, it honestly didn't look like anything you'd find in a biology textbook. It had this really tough, scaly skin, a head that looked a lot like a giant lizard, and these long, pale appendages spilling out from a torn section of its body. People gathered in no time, snapping photos and, speculating whether it was some ancient beast, a prehistoric survivor, or maybe something entirely unknown. The truth, though, while less mythical, was just as fascinating. Experts actually identified the creature as a bloated and decomposing deep-sea animal, possibly a really large oarfish or whale distorted by time, gases, and the river conditions. Those strange white tentacles? They were actually muscle tissues and intestines pushed out by pressure during decay. Still, despite the scientific explanation, the discovery kind of reignited old stories in the region, tales of river serpents and forgotten creatures from local folklore. And in that moment, the line between science and legend blurred, proving once again that, the natural world can still surprise us in ways that feel almost otherworldly. In 2016, while excavating a construction site near Athens, archaeologists unearthed a discovery that raised more questions than it answered. Lying side by side in neat rows were dozens of skeletons, men with their arms and legs bound in iron shackles. Their bones dated back over 2,500 years to the rise of ancient democracy, and nobody had ever seen anything quite like it. These weren't criminals dumped in a pit. Their bodies were carefully lined up, suggesting that someone took the time to organize this mass burial. Yet their bindings remained on, rusted and fused to the bones. Some were even chained in pairs. The precision of the scene felt both clinical and tragic. Experts believe the victims may have been part of a failed uprising, possibly supporters of a political figure trying to seize control. Their execution, done in one swift wave, was likely meant to send a message. No tombstones, no honors, just iron, dirt, and silence. The most chilling part is how well the bodies were preserved. The bone alignment, the position of the shackles, even traces of the straps used to bind them. Everything was intact. It gave archaeologists a rare opportunity to understand how power worked in the ancient world, especially during its darker moments. While Athens is celebrated as the birthplace of democracy, this grave reminds us that progress wasn't always peaceful. Beneath the temples and theaters lie the remains of real people caught in the political currents of the time. People who likely never made it into the history books until now. When the RMS Titanic sank in the North Atlantic in 1912, over 1,500 people lost their lives in one of the most iconic maritime tragedies ever recorded. The ship was a floating palace filled with everything from mahogany staircases to full orchestras. But deep beneath the waves, it became something else entirely, a graveyard, resting 2 miles below the surface. For decades, the wreck remained untouched. Then in the 1980s, it was finally found. The images were surreal. Dinner plates still stacked, shoes resting where bodies once lay, unopened bottles of wine scattered across the ocean floor. But what stunned researchers the most were the eerie traces of the passengers themselves. While human remains were mostly gone, their outlines, footwear, clothing, and personal items remained in place. frozen in time by the deep sea's stillness. In one spot, a pair of leather shoes lay side by side next to a pocket watch and a comb. It was clear someone had once been there, perhaps waiting, perhaps holding on to hope. These remnants weren't just artifacts. They were silent witnesses, and yet despite the sadness, nothing about the Titanic wreck feels staged. It's real. Down there in the dark, where there's no sound and almost no light, the everyday items speak louder than words. Eyeglasses, toothbrushes, letters, each one a memory that drifted down with the ship and stayed there. Beneath the busy streets of Paris, far below the cafes and fashion houses, there's a hidden world that once held more people than the city above. In the 18th century, overflowing cemeteries forced city officials to begin moving the dead into old stone quarries underground. Over time, this vast labyrinth turned into what we now know as the Paris catacombs. But what most visitors don't realize is that beyond the candlelit tourist paths lie countless sealed vaults that have never been mapped, and when they're opened, the silence is overwhelming. In recent years, archaeologists working under the streets near old convents and churches uncovered multiple burial vaults packed floor to ceiling with human bones. These weren't the decorative skull walls tourists see. These were hidden chambers, some still filled with the smell of ancient decay, sealed off centuries ago and forgotten as the city grew on top of them. What makes these vaults different is what was left behind with the dead. Old wooden coffins, rusted keys, scraps of cloth, and once even a carefully folded letter tucked beneath a femur. In one case, the bones were mixed with construction debris, suggesting that when buildings were renovated centuries ago, they simply tossed human remains aside and bricked them up. Forensic teams studying the remains found signs of overcrowding, stress, and illness, evidence that many of these people lived difficult lives during times of plague, war, or famine. In one vault, they discovered layers of bones stacked in such a way that it looked like people had been added in waves, possibly during a deadly epidemic. Today, these hidden corners of Paris are being studied slowly, quietly, and with great care. Some vaults are too dangerous to open, and others are so deep that modern equipment struggles to reach them. But what's already been found paints a haunting picture. Beneath one of the world's most celebrated cities lies a city of the forgotten. Not kings, not heroes, just ordinary people packed together in the dark, their stories locked behind stone walls for hundreds of years until now. They brought back moon rocks, scanned its core, and found frozen water. What we now know about the moon will blow your mind. The story of the moon didn't begin quietly. According to the most widely accepted scientific theory, the moon was born out of chaos, a colossal cosmic crash. Over 4 billion years ago, Earth wasn't the calm blue planet we know today. It was still young, hot, and constantly bombarded by massive space rocks. Then came something even more dramatic. A Mars-sized object scientists call Theia slammed into Earth. It wasn't just a hit, it was a full-speed collision that changed both worlds forever. The impact didn't destroy Earth, but it did send a huge cloud of molten rock and debris flying into space. For a brief moment, Earth had a glowing ring of fire around it, not unlike the rings of Saturn, but made from our planet's own guts. That material didn't just drift off. It started to clump together, held by gravity, and began forming a brand new celestial body, the moon. This theory explains why the moon's composition is so similar to Earth's outer layers. Scientists have compared the isotopes in moon rocks brought back by the Apollo missions and found striking similarities. The moon isn't just Earth's neighbor. It's more like its twin forged from the same molten beginnings. Interestingly, the moon we see today didn't form instantly. After the impact, it would have taken days, maybe weeks, for the debris to settle and begin shaping into a sphere. And that sphere would have glowed red-hot for millions of years before cooling down. It was likely closer to Earth at first, much closer, looming much larger in the sky. Tidal forces eventually pushed it farther out to where it orbits now, about 239,000 miles away. There are other theories, of course. Some suggest the moon formed elsewhere and got captured by Earth's gravity. Others claim Earth and the moon formed side by side. But none of those theories line up with the chemical fingerprints found in lunar soil. The giant impact hypothesis still holds strong, because the pieces fit literally and scientifically. At first glance, they might not seem that special, gray, dusty, and worn. But under a microscope, they tell a story that spans billions of years. Lunar rocks are like time capsules. They've been untouched by rain, wind, or biological life. No erosion, no plant roots, no water running over them. In fact, some of the rocks are older than any rocks found on Earth's surface. One of them, nicknamed the Genesis Rock, is over 4.4 billion years old, practically from the time the moon itself formed. Most of the moon rocks fall into three main types: basalt, breccia, and anorthosite. Basalts are volcanic rocks, evidence of ancient lava flows that once oozed across the moon's surface. Breccias are a wild mix, formed from impacts, shattered pieces, fused together under intense heat and pressure. And anorthosite? That bright white rock that reflects sunlight so well it forms the highlands, and is thought to be the moon's original crust. Thanks to these samples, scientists discovered that the moon was once volcanically active. Some of the basalt flows date back billions of years, hinting at a time when molten rock welled up from within and spilled across massive plains. These plains, known as lunar maria, are what form the dark patches we can see from Earth with the naked eye. But the moon rocks didn't just reveal the moon's history, they helped unlock Earth's too. Isotope comparisons between lunar and terrestrial rocks showed a near-identical signature, supporting the idea that both Earth and Moon share a common origin, likely from the same planetary body after a giant impact. Even today, decades later, scientists are still analyzing tiny fragments from the Apollo samples. New technologies like scanning electron microscopes and mass spectrometers allow for more detailed investigations than ever before. Researchers have even found traces of solar wind particles embedded in the dust, direct physical evidence of the sun's influence. Stored for eons in lunar soil. Beneath the silent gray surface of the moon lies a world we can't see, but one that scientists have spent decades trying to understand. It might seem like a dead rock drifting through space, but the moon holds surprising layers within. And recent studies have revealed that its interior is far more complex and dramatic than once thought. The moon has a crust, a mantle, and a core much like Earth. But its core is smaller and less active. NASA scientists, using data from seismometers left by Apollo astronauts, discovered that the moon's core is partially molten. It's about 300 miles wide, surrounded by a fluid outer layer and a solid inner core. That inner core, according to a 2024 reanalysis using artificial intelligence, might be almost entirely made of metal and shockingly similar to Earth's, just scaled down. There's more. Underneath the surface, deep in the mantle, scientists have detected dense, metal-rich structures, possibly fragments of the early moon's chaotic formation. Some believe they could even be leftover pieces of Theia, the mysterious planet-sized body that may have collided with Earth to form the moon. These ultra-dense masses might help explain something that's long puzzled researchers: the moon's gravitational lumps, or mascons, short for mass concentrations, that subtly tug at spacecraft and alter their paths. In 2023, thermal mapping of the moon's interior suggested heat is still leaking out from deep below, especially beneath certain craters. That led to a flurry of speculation, some of it based in science, some not. One of the most viral claims came when a satellite image, like the one you've seen in this video's thumbnail, appeared to show strange golden-hued formations in an ancient crater. Social media exploded with rumors: was there gold beneath the moon's surface? Were mining companies already planning missions to claim it? The truth, of course, is less flashy but still fascinating. The glow in those images wasn't gold, it was a combination of mineral reflectivity and lighting angles during lunar sunrise. However, there is a high concentration of rare elements in certain regions, including thorium and uranium. And some areas have an unusually high density of titanium, which would be valuable for future moon construction projects or resource harvesting. The idea of a lunar gold rush might be more fantasy than fact for now, but the interest it sparked reveals just how little we still know about what's hiding underground. And that's exactly why upcoming missions from NASA and other space agencies are focusing not just on the surface, but on drilling deeper. For most of human history, half of the moon remained invisible. Because the moon is tidally locked with Earth, it shows us only one face, the same face, every single night. The other side, often wrongly called the dark side, remained a total mystery until 1959, when the Soviet spacecraft Luna 3 snapped the very first grainy photos. What it revealed surprised everyone. Unlike the side we see from Earth, dotted with smooth, dark plains called Maria, the far side was a jagged, cratered wasteland. It looked older, harsher, and much less forgiving. That difference puzzled scientists. Why would one side be so different? Later research offered a clue. The Earth-facing side of the moon has a thinner crust, which allowed lava to rise and spread out after ancient impacts, forming the Maria. The far side's crust is thicker, so when meteors slammed into it, the molten rock couldn't break through. The result? No smooth seas, just pitted highlands. The biggest scar on the far side is the South Pole Aitken Basin, one of the largest impact craters in the solar system, stretching over 1,600 miles wide. It's so deep that it may have punched all the way into the moon's mantle. China's Chang'e 4 mission, which landed there in 2019, gave us an even closer look. It confirmed the presence of unusual minerals, possibly from beneath the crust, raising the possibility that this massive impact exposed material from the moon's interior. So the far side isn't darker, it's just unexplored territory, still holding secrets that may reshape what we know about the moon's origins and evolution. And now with new missions on the way, we're finally beginning to listen to the half that stayed silent for so long. If you walked on the moon without a spacesuit, you'd die in seconds, not because of freezing temperatures or cosmic radiation, but simply because there's no breathable air. But that doesn't mean the moon is completely empty of atmosphere. Technically, it does have one, just not the kind we're used to. Scientists call it an exosphere, and it's incredibly thin. So thin, in fact, that the number of molecules in a cubic centimeter of space would barely register about 100 molecules or fewer. By comparison, Earth's atmosphere contains roughly 10 billion molecules in the same space. That's why we often say the moon has no atmosphere at all, it's close enough. Still, what little it does have is fascinating. The moon's exosphere is made of trace elements like helium, sodium, and even potassium. These elements aren't held in place by gravity in the way Earth holds its air. Instead, they're released by solar radiation, micrometeor impacts, and radioactive decay from the moon's interior. Then they drift away into space within hours or days. In 2024, India's Chandrayaan-3 mission confirmed fluctuations in sodium emissions near the moon's surface, especially during solar storms. These spikes revealed how fragile the lunar exosphere is and how solar activity can shape it. NASA also discovered that water molecules might briefly exist in the exosphere during lunar daytime, vaporized from the surface by heat and sunlight. At night, when temperatures plunge, they freeze again or vanish. So yes, there's something up there, but calling it air would be like calling a fog a flood. It's barely detectable, yet still full of clues about the moon's interaction with space, the sun, and even Earth itself. For decades, scientists believed the moon was bone dry. Then came a discovery that changed everything: frozen water, hidden in shadowed craters near the poles. And not just traces, there could be hundreds of millions of tons of it, buried in regions that never see sunlight. The key to this discovery came from NASA's L-Cross mission, which in 2009 crashed a probe into a permanently shadowed crater near the moon's south pole. Instruments detected water vapor and ice fragments from the blast. Since then, both NASA and the Indian Space Agency ISRO have confirmed similar findings using infrared imaging and spectrometry. So where does this water come from? Some of it likely arrived on comets and asteroids that slammed into the surface billions of years ago. But there's also a good chance some was formed on-site, created when solar wind hydrogen collided with oxygen-bearing minerals in the lunar soil. These icy reserves are more than a scientific curiosity, they're a game-changer. Future moon bases could use this frozen water not just for drinking, but to generate breathable oxygen and rocket fuel through electrolysis. A moon colony could become self-sustaining, launching missions deeper into space without needing constant supplies from Earth. But there's a catch. These frozen craters are some of the most difficult places to reach. Temperatures plunge below -250 degrees Fahrenheit. There's no sunlight, no line of sight to Earth for communications, and the terrain is treacherous. Still, multiple countries are racing to get there. NASA's Artemis program, China's lunar landers, and private companies all have plans aimed at the poles. Because where there's water, there's potential for survival, for exploration, and maybe one day, for industry. It might not have roaring volcanoes or shifting tectonic plates like Earth, but the moon isn't entirely still. Beneath its ancient surface, the moon shudders, and sometimes it rumbles hard enough to crack rocks open. These are called moonquakes, and they come in several types, each revealing something different about what's happening under the surface. Some moonquakes are caused by temperature changes. The moon goes from boiling hot in the day to freezing cold at night, creating stress that causes the surface to creak and pop. These are minor and fairly harmless. Others come from meteorite impacts or tidal forces from Earth's gravity. But then there are the deep moonquakes, the ones that originate up to 700 miles below the surface. Detected by seismometers placed during the Apollo missions, some of these quakes can last up to 10 minutes. That's far longer than most quakes on Earth. What's causing them? Scientists believe it's the gravitational tug-of-war between the Earth and the Moon. As the Moon's orbit changes slightly over time, stress builds up and releases in these long, slow jolts. Even more mysterious are shallow moonquakes. These come from only a few miles beneath the surface, and they can be surprisingly strong, up to magnitude 5 on the Richter scale. That's enough to knock over equipment or damage a habitat. Some of them happen near fault lines, which may still be slowly shifting as the Moon cools and contracts. In fact, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter found evidence of fresh fault scarps ridges that form when the surface buckles, suggesting the Moon is still shrinking, even now. Understanding these quakes isn't just academic. If humans are going to build permanent structures on the Moon, we need to know what's moving under our feet. Because even in a place with no weather, no tectonics, and no life, the ground still trembles. Today, the Moon has no global magnetic field. A compass wouldn't work up there. But billions of years ago, things were very different. Ancient moon rocks reveal a surprising truth. The Moon once had a magnetic field nearly as strong as Earth's. So what happened? Scientists believe the Moon's core was once molten and active, just like Earth's. As the molten iron flowed, it created a dynamo, a natural magnetic generator. That field likely lasted for several hundred million years, shielding the lunar surface from solar radiation. But eventually, the small size of the Moon became its weakness. It cooled too quickly. The flow inside the core slowed, then stopped, and the magnetic field faded away. The strongest magnetic signals found today come from specific areas in the Moon's crust. These magnetic hotspots are leftover relics frozen in place when lava cooled during the Moon's early magnetic phase. Some are so powerful they even interfere with modern spacecraft instruments. In 2025, advanced simulations using Apollo rock data confirmed that this ancient magnetism peaked around 4 billion years ago before slowly declining. The Moon's once powerful field eventually faded into silence. Still, its traces remain, locked in stone. And these magnetic fingerprints do more than tell us about the Moon. They help scientists understand how planets form, how their cores behave, and what might be possible on other rocky worlds. Even Mars shows hints of a lost magnetic past. The Moon's magnetic history is like a ghost invisible today but recorded deep in its surface, reminding us that even silent worlds were once alive inside. Lunar dust may look soft and powdery in photos, but don't be fooled, it's one of the most dangerous substances on the Moon. This fine gray powder is known as regolith, and it's nothing like the dirt on Earth. Because there's no wind or water to smooth it out, lunar dust is sharp. Every grain is like a microscopic shard of glass. It clings to everything: spacesuits, tools, equipment. Apollo astronauts said it got into joints, scratched visors, and even smelled like gunpowder when brought into the lander. And then there's the health risk. The grains are so tiny that if inhaled, they could lodge in the lungs and never come out. Some scientists compare it to breathing in powdered glass or asbestos. During the Apollo missions, astronauts reported coughing, sneezing, and irritation after being exposed for only a few hours. In 2024, tests using simulated lunar dust on Earth confirmed that long-term exposure could cause serious health issues, especially in enclosed environments like moon bases. That's why NASA is now working on special filters, dust-repellent fabrics, and airlocks designed specifically to keep the dust outside. Even the surface itself is a challenge. Regolith can be deceptively loose, wheels sink, legs tip, and landers can kick up huge clouds of it during descent. That dust cloud can coat nearby instruments or reflect enough sunlight to throw off sensors. If humans are going to live on the Moon, we'll need to master the dust. Because up there, it's not just dirt. It's a silent hazard, one that hides in plain sight and could make or break long-term survival. Hidden beneath the Moon's surface lie long, winding tunnels, remnants of ancient volcanic activity. These are lunar lava tubes, and they might be the best hope we have for building future bases beyond Earth. Billions of years ago, the Moon was volcanically active. Rivers of lava flowed across its surface. As the top layers cooled and hardened, molten rock continued to flow underneath, eventually draining away and leaving behind hollow tubes, some stretching for miles. Why do these tubes matter now? Because they offer natural shelter. The Moon's surface is bombarded by solar radiation, hit by micrometeorites, and swings between extreme temperatures. But inside a lava tube, it's quiet, stable, and protected. Temperatures are more consistent, and there's shielding from both cosmic rays and the threat of quakes. Some of these caves are massive. Based on radar scans and satellite imagery, scientists believe some could be wide enough to fit skyscrapers inside. In fact, Japan's Kaguya spacecraft detected a 50-foot wide entrance leading to what might be a tunnel hundreds of feet deep. NASA and international space agencies are already looking at these tubes as possible sites for habitats. Robots could explore them first, followed by crews who would set up inflatable shelters or even use 3D printers to build habitats using lunar soil. And if that sounds like something out of The Expanse or Interstellar, it's not far off. These natural caves could be the foundation of real-life lunar cities, places where humans could live, work, and study in safety, deep inside the moon itself. The moon isn't just a distant rock in the sky, it actually shapes life on Earth every single day. Its gravitational pull is responsible for the tides. But, its influence runs even deeper than most people realize. Every time the tide rises or falls, it's because of the moon. Its gravity tugs at Earth's oceans, creating bulges that move as the moon orbits. This constant motion affects marine life, weather patterns, and even Earth's rotation. In fact, the moon is slowly slowing us down. Our days are getting longer by about 1.5 milliseconds every century. But here's the wild part without the moon. Earth might not be so stable. The moon acts like an anchor, helping to keep Earth's tilt, and therefore our seasons from wobbling too wildly. Without it, our planet could tilt dramatically over time, possibly creating extreme climate shifts that would challenge life as we know it. Some researchers believe the moon even played a role in the origin of life. The tidal zones it created, warm, shallow areas that rose and fell with the tides, may have been ideal places for early life to form. Those pools would concentrate chemicals, expose them to sunlight, and then cycle them back again. Even our calendars and myths are tied to the moon. Ancient cultures tracked time by its phases. Music, art, and even band names like Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon reflect its ever-present influence. So while it may feel distant, the moon is anything but. It's a silent partner in our planet's history, pulling the strings from 239,000 miles away, shaping oceans, guiding time, and maybe even helping spark the first spark of life. For decades, people have claimed to see strange things on the moon domes, towers, lights, even flying objects. Some say there are alien bases hidden in craters. Others point to satellite images with blurry shapes and cry cover-up. But what does the science say? Most of these claims come from low-resolution photos or misinterpretations of natural features. The human brain is wired to find patterns, especially faces or structures. It's called pareidolia, the same effect that makes people see shapes in clouds or figures on toast. When it comes to the moon's shadowy terrain, it's a perfect storm for this kind of illusion. One of the most famous cases is the so-called shard, a tall, thin shadow seen in early lunar photographs. Some believed it was a spire or antenna. Later, better images showed it was just a jagged ridge catching light at a sharp angle. Another popular claim is that lights or flashes seen on the moon must be evidence of alien activity. In reality, they're more likely caused by sunlight reflecting off freshly exposed rock, or even cosmic rays hitting a camera sensor. NASA and international space agencies have mapped nearly the entire surface of the moon with high-resolution imagery. So far, no alien structures, no artificial lights, no mystery bases. Still, the rumors persist, partly because the moon is close enough to watch but distant enough to imagine. It's been used in everything from Transformers' Dark of the Moon to conspiracy videos claiming secret missions. But in real science, the unexplained often has a very Earth-based answer. The moon is mysterious, but its secrets come from geology, not aliens. And the more we explore, the more we uncover beauty in the real over the imagined. Living on the moon is no longer just science fiction, it's actually a real goal. NASA, SpaceX, and other agencies are planning bases near the moon's poles, where frozen water can be mined for drinking and fuel. Inflatable shelters, underground habitats in lava tubes, and 3D printed structures using lunar soil are all on the table. Power will come from solar panels, and rovers will explore while robots help build. The first outposts will be small, but they could grow into permanent bases, the first steps to living beyond Earth. That's about it. Would you like to go to the moon? Write in the comments.